to make observations of the world. Do we need to do a survey to find out if some bachelors are married? No, we know that's a priori false. By the definition of bachelor, if a bachelor is defined as an unmarried male, never married, human, it follows that there aren't any married bachelors. That's a priori false. It's a priori true that all bachelors are human. Empirical statements are statements that require tests or observations, and these statements are a posteriori true or false. An example of an a posteriori true statement, after we've given an operational definition of happiness, the standard test of happiness, STH, what is that? You ask a person, are you happy? If they say yes, then they're happy. If they say no, they're not. We don't, if they say something else, or we don't understand what they say, we don't know. Some bachelors are happy. That's a posteriori true because indeed, when you ask people the question, some of them say yes. All bachelors are happy. That is a posteriori false because when that study was done, some of them said no. So those are examples of a posteriori true and false statements. So what are the differences? Definitions are neither true nor false, and these two both can be either true or false. What's the difference between these two? The logical statements, the truth is known a priori, or falseness a priori, and empirical statements, the truth is tested a posteriori, meaning with evidence, with observation, with having to look at the world, or use somebody else's observations of the world. Sometimes somebody else has taught you things that are empirically the case. They have made observations from which you believe that no one can go faster than the speed of light, or that the sun is 93 million miles away from the earth. Those aren't part of the definition of the sun. So what's the theory of unverifiable brownies? Well, that's the theory that everything that happens is caused by the actions of logically unverifiable brownies. Why was it presented? It was presented to illustrate a theory that doesn't qualify as a scientific explanation. What's psychology? It's the study of alternative explanations of behavior. What's behavior? Those are the actions of living beings. What's the study of scientific explanations? That means theoretical analysis and empirical evaluation. What is a scientific theory? Well, it's a set of statements that satisfies 5 criteria. Deductive. We're starting to learn about deduction last time. Meaningful. And we talked about the definition of meaning last time. The position of operationism is that the meaning of an empirical statement is equivalent to the set of all the operationally specifiable tests. All of the operationally specifiable tests. Somebody says there's a logical unverifiable brownie in the room. How would we test it? You can. Can't see it, smell it, taste it, touch it, feel it. You can't observe it with a browniometer. Microscope, telescope, they don't help at all. A germ culture, they don't grow in there. Look in the back corner, you won't see one, they're invisible. So it doesn't qualify as meaningful. And so why was the theory presented? To illustrate that you want theories to be meaningful, and that's an example of a non-meaningful theory. And you will also see other versions of this theory when you take psychology courses or other courses at the university. You'll get other versions of the theory of brownies. Some people aren't even aware that what they're teaching you is not testable. You should always ask them the question, what's the difference between this and the theory of unverifiable brownies? If they can't answer that, you have to watch out. Pay close attention. Remember, I want you to be skeptical and open-minded. That means not gullible. That means you'll not believe everything just because somebody says so. But you'll also consider the arguments and the evidence. What's happening this weekend? Super Bowl. What's happening today? State of the Union address by the President. How many of you are over 18? Yes. Be skeptical and open-minded. Pay close attention to what people, members of Congress say. You'll be voting for them soon and deciding such issues as, do we need to cut the taxes for the Koch brothers? You know who the Koch brothers are? They're two very rich people that inherited a lot of money from their father. Their father developed a method for extracting gasoline from oil. He applied for a patent, but they said, that's already been invented, and we're not going to give you a United States patent for that. At that time, the Soviet Union didn't recognize the American patent system, and they said, we'll accept your method. Come on over here and refine gasoline for us. He went to work for Joseph Stalin, the then dictator of the Soviet Union, and made a fortune. And he came back home with a hatred of communism. And he taught his sons that hatred, and now they're at work trying to get rid of communism. And one of the things they think is communism is this, public education. Trying to put an end to public funding of public education. Why should rich people pay for poor people to get educated? That's the question they ask, stuff like that. Be skeptical and open-minded. You'll get a chance to see some of the issues today, but pay attention to it. Till now, I know many of you haven't been paying attention to the news, haven't been paying attention to what's going on in the world, what's going on in politics, but you'll be voting. You're 18 now. You'll be choosing the leaders of our country. You got to figure out whether what they're saying is right or not. Vote for the people that are going to do the things you think will be in your benefit and the benefit of the country. So you can start paying attention today. That'll be on this evening, State of the Union address. So we want a theory to be deductive, meaningful, predictive, causal, and general. And we're learning about these things. We've gotten last time the idea of deduction, and I taught you two principles of deduction. So let me make sure you've had quiz the solutions. There are other things you could have said. Definition is a statement of equivalence. A logical statement is a statement whose truth is known a priori. A empirical statement, a statement whose truth is tested a posteriori with respect to observation. They're all statements. That's something, they all might appear as part of an explanation. You might have a definition. You might have logical statements and empirical statements being part of the statements that make up an explanation. And the criteria for a scientific explanation or a scientific theory. Theory of unverifiable brownies doesn't qualify because it's not meaningful. Any questions about this? Why was it presented? Was to teach you to pay attention to theories that may or may not even be meaningful. Remember, now in the Super Bowl, I wouldn't be surprised if some defensive back for Seattle says, you're ugly, your brownie is ugly, your mother's brownie is really ugly. And then somebody will punch him, right, and they'll be thrown out of the game. Right? Defensive backs are famous for saying stuff like that, trying to annoy people. All right, well, you've learned if somebody tells you your logically unverifiable brownie is ugly, that they're not actually saying anything. They might be getting you mad, but they're not actually saying anything. Or you could say to the person, or teach the tight end, or whoever it is that happens to be given that speech by that defensive back, tell them, define your terms. Right? Instead of punching the guy, ask him what he means by these logically unverifiable brownies and their fringes and so on. All right, so we've had the idea of deduction, and we had this example. Premise 1 and premise 2, we had Socrates is an Athenian. And all Athenians are Greek. And a deduction has the property that if the premises are true, and the deduction, in this part, the going from P1 and P2 to the conclusion here is called deduction. And a deduction is always logical and follows mathematical rules. And I taught you two of the rules last time. From these two, if Socrates is an Athenian and all Athenians are Greek, we can conclude that Socrates is Greek. Because if P1 and P2 are true, P1 and P2, and last time I told you that this symbol means and, in the sense that both P1 and P2 are true, not P1 or P2, but P1 and P2 are both true. If these premises are true, then the conclusion follows. So if the premises are true, the conclusion is true. If the conclusion is true, does that, and the deduction is logical, does that mean the premises are true? And the answer to that is no. It's possible to deduce a perfectly true conclusion from false premises. For example, bread is good to eat. What's our definition, our operational definition of bread is good to eat? Bread is good to eat, we're given following operational definitions. If you take young rats and you feed them on X and water and they survive for 6 weeks, we'll say it's good to eat. And indeed, if you feed rats on bread and water for 6 weeks and they're young rats, standard laboratory conditions, they will live for 6 weeks. You don't want to start off with 5-year-old rats because most rats die after 2-3 years. So we're going to start off with young rats and feed them on bread and water and they will live. So bread is good to eat, that's empirically true, a posteriori true. But let's say I want to deduce it from this theory. Premise 1 is bread is made of cyanide. And everything made of cyanide is good to eat. Let me just write GTE, good to eat. Is that logical? Is that a proper deduction? Yes. If the premises were true, then the conclusion would be true. And in this case, the conclusion is true, but the premises are false. Is bread made of cyanide? I hope not. And is everything made of cyanide good to eat? No. Cyanide is the poison that Adolf Hitler's mistress, well, he married her, that was his wife by the time she took it, killed herself with. He gave some to his dog Blondie first. German Shepherd. Here, Blondie, try this. Yeah, kill me too fast. Should work for you. And Braun took it, bit into the cyanide capsule, fell over dead. Hitler says, I don't trust it. He shot himself in the head. Goering, war criminal, worked for Hitler. He took cyanide. He was sentenced to death by hanging after the war. He took cyanide capsule and cheated the hangman. And Himmler was arrested. When they figured out he was Himmler, he took a cyanide capsule and killed himself. So we know cyanide is not good to eat. We know bread is not made of cyanide, at least not in this state. Maybe some other states you've been reading about. Maybe Tennessee and Kentucky, they might legalize stuff like that, as long as somebody can make a profit from it. So it's possible, if the conclusions are true, then the conclusion is true. But if the conclusion is true, so if P1 and P2 are true, that implies that the conclusion is true. But if the conclusion is true, we don't know anything about the premises. This means you can't ever prove a theory is true. Scientific theory is true. I know a lot of movies tell you otherwise. I'm trying to prove my theory and they said it couldn't be done. I'm eating bread and bread is good to eat. That proves it's made of cyanide. Look, I'm eating the bread and it's good. So I've proved my theory is true. Just because your conclusion is true doesn't mean the premises are true. You can test a theory, but you can't prove it, because it's the nature of deduction. Theory is going to consist of a set of statements from which we can deduce the things to be explained. And these premises have to satisfy certain criteria that I listed for you a minute ago, including that it's deductive and that they're meaningful. These are meaningful but false. So these are empirically false statements. So a false theory could lead to true conclusions. You can't prove a theory true is what that means. Now I taught you two principles. One was called the implication, the transitivity of implication. If A implies B and B implies C, that means that A implies C. And I taught you different ways to write it. All A's are B and all B's are C means all A's are C. Or if A then B and if B then C, that means if A then C. And I taught you another principle, which was what does if A then B mean? And that one is if A implies B is the same as, some people write ISA, is the same as or if and only if not B implies not A, where this is not. And different notation systems get used to refer to not B. Here are some of the examples. Here's our Venn diagram. This is the set D. Everything that is not B is out here in the striped part of the diagram. And so some people will say B bar. Sometimes you'll see B with a prime on it. Sometimes you'll see B with a little C up there, where the C refers to the complement. And it's C-O-M-P-L-E-M-E-N-T, not complement with an I, which is when somebody praises you for looking good today. So complement, B complement is, oh, you look very good today, B, with an I. But B complement means everything that isn't B, such that when you add B and complement of B, you get the universal set. So the union of B and B prime, or B bar, or not B, these are different ways of writing not B. And these things are also called the complement of B, which means they complete the set. If you take B and B complement, you put them together, and you get the universal set. All right. So if A then B is the same as if not B then not A. And this can also be written a lot of different ways, and I wrote them out in various ways. All A's are B is the same as all not B's are not A. Or if A then B is the same as if not B then not A. And so on. Any questions about those two principles? We had those two principles of logic. And we know what meaning of a sentence is. A meaning is equivalent to the set of implications for testing it. Before I erase this, any questions about deduction? We've just talked about deduction and a few different properties. And this one right here is if the premises are true and we use the proper deduction, then the conclusion is true. But you can deduce true conclusions from false premises. But if the conclusion is false, so if the conclusion is false, what do we know? So if the premises are true, then the conclusion is true. If the conclusion is false, that means that the premises can't both be true. So if the conclusion is false, we know that the intersection from I equals 1 to n of all the premises is false. It can't be the case that all the... So we know that this is false. In other words, they can't all be true. At least one of the premises, and maybe all of them, are false. In this case, both of them are false. It could be that they're both meaningless. You could have said, whenever a brownie sneezes, bread is good to eat, and the brownie has sneezed, therefore bread is good to eat. You could deduce meaningless premises. I can deduce a true conclusion, meaningful and true conclusion. But if the conclusion is false, the theory can be rejected. And the theory consists, not all of the premises necessarily, but at least one of them is wrong. So you got to revise your theory. So we can test and disprove scientific theories, but we can't prove them true. All right, so let's put these to work. Any other questions about it before I erase this? Here was an example of deduction, and it illustrated one of the two logical principles that I taught you, and there are many others. When you take a course in logic, they'll teach you lots of theorems of how to reason from premises to conclusions by deduction. All right, so here are 4 cards. And this is what shows. So there's a deck of cards, and 4 cards have been dealt out on the table. And you can assume that all cards have a number on one side, an Arabic numeral, like these Arabic numerals we use. So they have an Arabic numeral on one side, and a letter, a Roman letter, these are our Roman alphabet, letter on the other. And now somebody comes along with the following conjecture. Now, conjecture is like a hypothesis. It's an idea that might or might not be true that somebody puts forward for argument's sake. Maybe it's correct or not correct, but we're not going to claim it is, and we're going to put it forward and ask how we would test it. So here's a conjecture. All cards with an even number on one side have a vowel on the other. You know what I mean by even numbers? Here's the even numbers consist of the set including -6, -4, -2, 0, +2, 4, 6, and so on. In other words, these are integers that are evenly divisible by 2 without remainder. And by vowels, I mean A, E, I, O, and U. So I'm going to forget about Eastern European names and things like that that are spelled with Y's and things that are sometimes behaved like vowels. So just so we don't have any arguments, even numbers will be integers evenly divisible by 2 without remainder, and vowels are going to be letters that are A, E, I, O, or U. Everybody clear on the assumption? All the cards, there aren't any cards that have letters on both sides or numbers on both sides. They all have a letter on one side and a number on the other. And the numbers are all integers. Okay, what does it mean? Do people understand what the sentence means? Everybody understand what it means? There's a test if you understand what it means, because we already said the idea of meaning was equivalent to the tests. And so the question is, what's the smallest set of cards we have to turn over to test it? What do we mean by a test? A test is an opportunity to disprove. If it's false, the test has the opportunity to disprove it. So what is the smallest set of cards that we need to turn over? The answer might, this is multiple choice here, like a lot of our test questions will be multiple choice. Turn over, we know it in advance, a priori. We don't have to turn anything over. Or turn over the 1 only, or the 2 only, or the A only, or the B only, or the 2 and the, let me start with the 1 and the 2, the 1 and the A, the 1 and the B, the 2 and the A, the 2 and the B, the A and the B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, there's 6 of those. Or the 1, the 2, and the A, or the 1, the 2, and the B, or the 2, the A, and the B, or the 1, the A, and the B. Okay, so that's those 4. And the 1, the 2, the A, and the B, all 4. 16 possibilities as to what this says. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16 possibilities. I've got them all listed there. What is the smallest set of numbers that we have to turn over to test it? Write it down on your paper there. The answer. What does this sentence mean? Because if you understand what a sentence means, you should understand how to test it. And a test is something you do that could be either consistent with the theory or it could potentially refute it if the statement is false. That's an example of a test. There are other things you could do, like you could call somebody up on the phone, but they don't know. All right, everybody got an answer? How many say none, a priori true? How many say we need to turn over the one only? The two only? One. The A only? One.
Oh, two.
The B only? The two and the A, or the one and the two? The one and the A? The one and the B? The two and the A? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. You know, 25. The two and the B. To be or not to be? We had that question last time. A or the B? The A and the B. The one, the two, and the A. The one, the two, and the B. The two, the A, and the B. The one, the A, and the B. All four. 1, 2, 3, 4. Some people didn't vote. There's only, say, 29, 30, 31, 32 votes, and there's about 90 people in here, so 2/3. How many of you don't know what this sentence means? Now, we've had all cards, it's basically one of our ideas here, all A's or B, all cards with an even number on one side have a vowel on the other. If it has an even number, then it has a vowel. Or even implies vowel, all these different ways of saying the same thing there. Well, let's construct a truth table and see what we have to do. We have to turn over the one. Now this thing says all cards with an even number. Does it say what can be the case on one is an odd number? Does it say what the odd can have? So if if this one had an A on the other side, that's a vowel, is that okay?
Yeah.
So it's okay. And if on the other side is a consonant, like a B or a C or something else, is that okay? So that's okay. So we don't need to turn over the one. So we just decided these people are out. And this one here too, 1, 2, and A.
And one AB.
A lot of them.
1 AB? Is there any people vote for 1 AB?
Oh,
We have a 2 and an A with 25 people.
Anything with a one.
Everything, all right, well, we can rule out everything that has a 1 in it. Yeah, we don't need to turn over the 1. All these have been ruled out already. We can rule this one out and this one out. Yeah. But nobody voted for those, so. All right, now, do we have to turn over the 2? It says every card with an even number on one side has to have a vowel on the other. So if we turn over the 2 and there's a vowel on the other side, like an A or an E or an I or an O, that would be okay, right?
mm-hmm.
But how about if we turn over the 2 and there's a B or a C or a D?
I would just do it.
That would be no good. All right, NG, no good. And this is a test then, because this has the opportunity to disprove it. So if we turned it over and found 2 having a B on the other side, that would be bad. Now, we have to turn over the A. If we turn over the A and there's a 2 on the other side, is that okay?
Yeah.
That would be okay. How about if we turn over the A and there's a 1 on the other side?
No.
Wait a minute, I thought you said 1 could have an A on the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1 can have an A on the other side. This doesn't say that only cards, only even cards have a vowel. It says if it has an even number, then it has a vowel. It doesn't say only even can have a vowel. It doesn't say if and only if. It just says all evens have a vowel. It doesn't say only evens can. If I say all dogs have noses, does that mean anything with a nose is a dog? No. So, if the 1 is on the other side, that's okay. Just same as this 1 with an A on the other side. So that's okay. So we don't need to test the 2. So 2 and A, that's out. How about the B? Suppose we turn over the B and there's a 1 on the other side. Is that okay? Yeah. How about if there's a 2 on the other side? No good. All right? No good, because the 2 should have a vowel on the other side. So this is a test. Remember to be or not to be? An issue about it? The answer was to be in this case. Now, you could have also learned that by saying, if you think to yourself, all even have vowels, that's the same, is the same as all not vowels have not even. So you had to check the evens, that's the 2 in this case, and what is it that is not a vowel? The B. You needed to check the 2, the evens, and the not B. This applies the other. Now, this is not atypical for a freshman class in introductory psychology. Unfortunately, I mean, they're supposed to, it's California curriculum, they're supposed to teach you logic and set theory in the 4th grade, starting with the 4th grade. They're supposed to teach you how to understand what if A then B means, because an awful lot of contracts are of the form, if you sign this, then this is what's going to happen. Now, for those of you that aren't going to learn logic, let me give you a couple shortcuts. I can lower your monthly payments means I am going to take your house. All right, so just memorize that one. I can cut your monthly, I told you the story last time. I can cut your monthly payments means I am going to take your house. All right. I'm going to give you a scholarship means give me half of everything you earn for the rest of your life. Sign up for this government loan means you're going to give me half of everything you earn for the rest of your life. I mean, one of the political things that happened in the last 30 years, they went from supporting students through school with scholarships and with tax support for educational institutions to increasing the tuition, so you're charging more of the students, to government guaranteeing loans. And so students take out loans. And I told you last time, student loans are one of these things that once you take out that loan, you cannot declare bankruptcy and get away from it. People that do all sorts of weird things, like the people that polluted half the water supply in an entire state, they just declared bankruptcy so nobody can sue them. And the president of that corporation is going to have absolutely no penalty. They're not going to send him to jail, they're not going to fine him, and he's not going to have to give back any of the money he earned by creating that polluted situation. But students, when they borrow money, they can't declare bankruptcy and get away from it. If you're a polluter, you can declare bankruptcy and get away from the debt. But if you're a student, you cannot declare bankruptcy and get away from the debt. Now, banks, who do they want to loan money to if the government is guaranteeing the loan? To people that won't pay them back. So if they think you're a bad risk, they want to loan you money because the government guarantees you'll pay back, but you're going to screw up and not make all the payments, right? So they're going to increase the rate. They're going to increase the interest rate. And so what this means is they're gonna get half of what you earn for the rest of your life, basically. So basically, you're becoming somebody else's slave. You guys see 12 years a slave? Not yet. All right. Otherwise, better learn some logic before you sign a contract or an agreement or a mortgage on a house or a contract for work. If you can't understand now, there other people sure have worked on figuring out how to write things so that they aren't the clearest in the world to you to understand. And credit cards and credit that they will give students. I don't know if you guys watch C-SPAN, pretty boring. If you ever turn it on the channel and blah, blah, that people talking. But if you stop and listen to it, you may find interesting things. I was watching it one day and I saw this guy come on. He was a college student, had been a college student, and they decided to loan him money. They said, you're going to buy this $300 item. It's a good idea for you to establish credit. I'm going to sell it to you, and no payments and no interest are due for a year. And after that, basically nothing is due for, we're not going to bill you for an entire year. So he said, oh, that seems like a good deal. That way, it's like I'm going to earn interest on the money, establish credit. They will give him a credit account to buy the $300 item. So he bought the $300 item, but he didn't read the fine print. So he charged $300 plus the tax. So he was over his limit. And that meant they could charge him $75 a month for every month that he was over limit. But they didn't send him any bills for a year. And they were charging interest, and they upped the interest rate to 36%. Pretty soon he owed thousands of dollars. First bill comes, he thought it was going to be for $300. A year later, he owed a lot of money, and he started making payments, and he was getting farther and farther behind. And pretty soon he said, I called him on the phone, he said, look, listen, I paid you $6,000, and you say I still owe $6,000? He said, that's right. He said, how am I ever going to get out of this debt? They said, you're not, that's the idea. We are making money. This is profit. This is profit motive. Profit motive is a good thing when you can take advantage of stupid people who are willing to sign things they don't understand. He took him to court. He said, I'm not going to pay you anymore. I paid $6,000 on a $300 item, and I'm not going to pay anymore. They took him to court, sued him. The judge listened to the story and said, you mean you've collected $6,000 from this guy, and you say he still owes you $6,000? That is the most disgusting, despicable business practice I've ever heard of. Turned to the kid and said, but you still owe him the $6,000. Now, he should have declared bankruptcy because it wasn't a student loan. That's what he ought to do. If he was a corporation, he'd do that. So, if you're not going to understand logic, you better understand at least a couple things. One of which is, I'm going to loan you this money means you'll pay me half of everything you earn for the rest of your life, or I can lower your monthly payment. The other one, of course, is I'm going to cut your taxes. I'm going to cut your taxes. Another one. Watch out for people that say stuff like that. Worst thing is if they actually do cut your taxes. All right. It's an indictment of our educational system that people haven't been trained in logic, but this is the most basic idea. If A, then B. If you sign this contract, here's what it means. That is the most basic kind of statement you can have in logic. This is sometimes called the Watson task, and they're going to give you this example and many others if you take that course, Psych 110, where they talk about reasoning and problem solving. We've talked about deduction and given an example of it. Now I want to say some words about induction. So deduction is one kind of argument. It's an argument based on logical principles to go from premises to a conclusion using logic. Induction works like this. It's based on using the past to predict the future. For example, if I drop this, what do you think will happen? It'll fall. I heard people saying it'll fall. You think it'll fall. So we have this idea, we've got a hypothesis here, lambda. This is the Greek letter lambda. Makes the L sound. So our law is that A, if I drop it, B will fall. And how do you test it? Well, you try it out. First time. Now this is not like in the movie Gravity. I haven't seen that one yet. You guys seen that movie?
Yeah.
Is that any good? Oh, okay. I'll go see it. So A1, now if she drops something, you know, can Mike go flying off, right? Because there's no gravity. Right now, we're assuming we're near the Earth. We've got some standard arbitrary condition. And it fell again. So each time you do this, you start to think, you know, it fell twice. Maybe it'll fall 3 times. Yeah, fell again. A3, B3. This time, everybody try to keep it from falling. Concentrate. Now you guys weren't trying that. A4, B4, that's called psychokinesis if you believe in that. And people have been trying this for years, it doesn't work. Except in Star Wars. Don't mess with the Force. A5, B5. Try really hard this time. A6, B6, and at some point after n of these, you start to believe that somewhere we get up to A n, B n, for some value n, and you say, that's enough evidence, I think it's going to happen next time too. I think it's going to happen on trial n plus 1, Bn plus 1. I think that if somebody drops it tomorrow, it'll fall then too. And this is using the principle of induction that allows us to go from the past to predicting the future. So we're using the past to predict the future. Now some statements, you know, are fairly simple, like there's a $1,000 bill here. That's a fairly simple assertion, even though it has many implications. There's a lot of things you can do to test it. But a statement like, whenever I drop this, it falls, is a statement going off into the future, not just about what's the case right now. There's a $1,000 bill here now, there's always a $1,000 bill. You're making quite a much stronger statement. Statements like that are called generalizations. So this is an example of a generalization, and we'll be talking about 2 kinds of generalizations here in a bit. So the idea that you can use the past to predict the future is based on this principle of induction. But the principle of induction itself is a little bit slippery. How do we know the principle of induction is true? Somebody said, always worked in the past, so we think it'll work in the future. Somebody said, wait a minute, you can't use the principle to prove itself. Somebody else said, God makes it work. If there were, and then somebody else said, but if there's no God, then that means induction doesn't work anymore. Those people are called existentialists. And existentialism is both a movement in philosophy and a movement in literature. Some of the literary existentialists, like Sartre and Camus, wrote books and essays from the point of view of existentialism. You can also take a course in existentialism in the philosophy department. And the existentialists said basically, we don't believe in the principle of induction. It makes life a little bit complicated for them. You take them up to the 8th floor and say, if you don't believe in don't believe in the principle of induction, you wouldn't mind stepping off. They say, don't tempt me, I won't do it today. But you say, well, why not? You can believe, if I drop a thing, it falls. You're not worried about it. You don't believe in the principle of induction. So you say, yeah, I just don't want to prove it to you right now. Then there was the old man who thought he'd live forever. See, first he thought he might die, went to bed, he woke up alive, he went to bed, he woke up alive. Then he said, maybe I'm gonna live forever. So, you know, went to bed alive, he woke up alive, he went to bed alive, woke up alive. Pretty soon he had 1,000. Right? After 1 year, he already had 365. Pretty soon he had 10,000. He said, every day I'm more and more convinced that I'm going to live forever. Every day he lives. The stronger the argument is, he's going to live forever. What's wrong with the argument? Do you think he's reasonable? Does he use the principle of induction correctly here? Well, you're saying no, but why? What's wrong? What? So she says at some point he's going to die. You want to say it very loudly now, did you? Someday. We don't want to say bad things too loudly, other people might hear them. You think he's going to die? How do you know? Because what? We all do. Not yet. How do you know we all do? You think we all are going to die? Probably will, but why? How do you know? Have we died yet? Other people have died in the past. So you're saying there was person number 1, and they didn't live past 130, and then there was person number 2, and they didn't live past 130. And we don't know anybody that, you know, we actually know when they were born. I mean, there's cases in the Bible that kind of fishy. Somebody after the fact, you know, that guy lived 314 years. He begat so-and-so. Except for those cases where we don't have a birth certificate. You know, we don't know anybody where we have a birth certificate where they live past 130. So you might think nobody's going to live past 130, including this guy. But is it guaranteed? It's a little bit fishy. Do you think it's possible someday they'll come up with some way of taking out your stem cells from your bone somewhere, playing with them in some way and injecting them back into you so that you stay young, so you don't die unless somebody murders you? Die of embarrassment or some other disease that kills you, but you wouldn't die of old age. It's possible. We don't know that for sure. It might happen. It'll become a very crowded world that somebody invents such a thing. The Koch brothers will be the first ones to get it. They can afford it right now. Billionaires. All right. So there's some things that are a little fishy about induction. This guy says he uses himself and he wants to predict what's going to happen, and every night he thinks he's going to live forever, whereas you guys are using other people and you say, based on what's happened with other people, I think the older he gets, the more likely he is to die. And you folks are with the insurance companies, because they're the people that sell insurance policies. And if they think you're going to die, do they sell you life insurance? No, why? Because they charge money to sell you life insurance, and if you live, they get to keep the money. And if you die, what happens? They have to give you the money. And your relatives get it. So they don't like to give money away. So there's something about induction, it's a lot slipperier than deduction, but these are two types of arguments. Deduction is more like logical statements in the world of logic and mathematics. And induction is sort of in the world of, the idea is you have natural laws that the past, you're using the past to predict the future, and you're saying the laws of nature stay the same. That's basically the idea, and that there's some kind of law of nature going on here that you're establishing based on evidence, using to make that prediction. Any questions about induction? So induction is a lot slippery thing. Existentialist steps off the 100th floor of the building, or maybe they had to jump, you know, on 9/11, a lot of people were jumping on the building. And they start to fall, they go past the 100th floor, and they say, okay, so far. An optimistic existentialist, they pass another floor, okay, so far. And pretty soon they're past 50 floors, and it's been okay, it's 51. Pretty soon they say, I think it's going to be all right. I'll let you guys fill in the rest quietly. Yeah. That's not funny. All right. We don't make that joke anymore. All right. Any questions about induction? It's a little bit slipperier kind of business. More debatable. Not all the philosophers agree. You've got the existentialists there. What do they substitute for it? Well, they don't really have a good, clear substitution. Now, among the generalizations, so we've talked about empirical statements. And we've got some that are simple facts. And there are things like historical statements. What did I say last time on here? And there are things called generalizations. And generalizations require the use of induction. And among these generalizations, some of them are called statements of correlation, and some of them are called statements of causation. And it's going to take me a while to explain causation and correlation before we get started here. So let me tell you about a study that's been done and doesn't need to be done again, because it's been done sufficiently that we don't need to do it again, but I'll describe it as though we're trying to find out something for the first time. There's a lot of people in the world, but some of them have strep throat. And a doctor can identify strep throat by taking throat culture and looking at it under a microscope. Indeed, that's a streptococcus bacteria. And among the people that have strep, we might want to try to do something for them, and somebody gets the idea they would like to test the effect of penicillin to find out if people are less likely to die who've received penicillin. So we're going to set up our treatment, and the treatment, we're going to have a treatment group that gets penicillin. And we're going to have a control group that gets a placebo. What's a placebo? Well, as you've read in chapter 2, a placebo is an inert treatment, like a starch pill that contains all the binding ingredients that you use. And it looks like the penicillin, only it doesn't contain the penicillin. Now, why do you want to use a placebo? Because it turns out that a placebo alone is better than nothing. People have done experiments this way. We have no treatment versus a placebo. Tell people, oh, you're sick, here, take these pills. They should be effective. Make you feel better. A lot of people feel better. This works by voodoo. You guys know how voodoo works? There's bad voodoo and there's, bad voodoo. The person, makes a doll of you. And they say, you see the hair? I got some hair. You cut your hair the other day. I got some to put it in there. And your nails. Right. And I dressed up native, look like you. See this little wax doll. Tonight while you're trying to sleep, see this needle? I'm going to get you. So, the person's laying there in bed, oh, I kind of feel like some gas or something. Maybe that person's got that needle making me sick in there, The person's working away, telling them about it. Just the thought of it can be harmful. Or you can go to Louisiana and get a mojo hand from the voodoo practitioners down there. Now, a mojo hand is kind of a magic pouch or something. So some guy, if you guys have heard the music, I'm going to go to Louisiana, get me a mojo hand, and fix my woman so she can't have no other man. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do with a mojo hand. But some guy, has trouble meeting women. They tell him, we've got a mojo hand for you that'll make you irresistible to women. Mix it up, put some stuff in there, who knows what. Chicken blood, guts, beans, bird feathers, all kind of magical stuff. They put it in a little pouch, don't wear it on his neck. Well, now he feels attractive, and he is more attractive, right? Meets somebody, gives credit to the voodoo practitioner. So placebos can work. And we want to find out if the penicillin by itself actually is more beneficial than just giving somebody some pill. So whenever you evaluate a treatment, you want to evaluate the treatment with respect to a placebo condition. And we want this, I'm going to describe what's known as a triple blind study. the book talks about a double-blind study, but really there are 3 levels of blindness. In here, I've written, I don't know, maybe one of the editions he's taken my advice, bring in a triple-blind. Sometimes they talk about double-blind. In a triple-blind study, the patients don't know whether they're in the penicillin or the placebo condition. So the patients are blind. Now, why do you want the patients to be blind? By blind, I don't mean you put their eyes out or they can't see. They just can't see what condition they're in. Yes.
So their knowledge of like their standpoint in the experiment doesn't affect the outcome?
So their knowledge doesn't affect the outcome. I mean, after all, if you tell somebody, here's the placebo, they're sugar pills, they won't do you any good, but go ahead and take them if you want. Right? If you say that to somebody, you say to somebody, you are dying from an infection, but I'm just giving you sugar pills, that is a bad message, isn't it? Plus, the person might be affected by the message. Well, hell you, I'm going down to Mexico and I'm going to buy some Cipro down there. Or I'm going to go to the Philippines and get a, psychic surgeon to take the infection out of me. Or I'm going to go get some peach pits and grind them up and eat that because somebody said that would be good. People might do things that are dangerous, and they might do things that are helpful, and in which case you won't learn if the penicillin versus placebo is working. So you don't tell the people what they're getting. But basically, the way it's done is people have an infection of some kind, and they're told, are you willing to volunteer to be in a study? You will either receive penicillin, or maybe they'll just say the new treatment that we think is beneficial, but we don't know, or you will receive a placebo, and you won't know which. Are you willing to be in that study? The new treatment might be harmful, or it might be beneficial, or it might be a mixture of both. It might be that you're taking some risk by taking it, and you might have some possible benefit. We don't know until we give it to people. Nobody can know before the study was done if the whole idea of penicillin is it kills things. Maybe it kills the people you give it to. So that was one of the possibilities. You don't need to do the study anymore, though, because I'll tell you how it comes out. So these are the people with strep. We're going to randomly assign people to conditions. And they won't know whether they had the placebo or the penicillin. Why randomly assign them to conditions? So that nothing else is confounded with getting the treatment or placebo. We don't want confounded variables. Why not let some people volunteer? Who would like to have the placebo and who would like to have the penicillin? Well, for one thing, they know which they're getting now. But secondly, who volunteers? Maybe the sickest one. Oh, I'm going to die anyway, give me the penicillin. I'll try. Maybe you get the most sick people or the most depressed people. Or maybe you get the most, none of these things can kill me. Give me the penicillin. I'm optimistic. Maybe you get the optimistic people who are more likely to live. So you don't want to have any other variable confounded. You want to use random assignments so that it's chance. Nothing else is mixed up with the treatment versus the placebo. Now the treatment versus the placebo, this is called the independent variable of the experiment. And a variable varies. And the variable in this case is penicillin versus placebo. It varies. And the dependent variable is the thing we suspect. This is what here's our suspected cause. Because we're trying to find out if penicillin causes more people to survive than placebo would. And our dependent variable is the suspected effect. And the dependent variable in this case is going to be fairly straightforward. It's going to be alive or dead. I'll use the letters IV for the independent variable. You'll be seeing that from now on. And DV for the dependent variable. And the DV, the dependent variable, is alive or dead. The variable has to vary. And so the dependent variable varies from alive to dead, and the independent variable varies from penicillin to placebo. Now we have the patients are blind. We also want the doctors to be blind. These two makes what's known as a double-blind study. Now, why do we want the doctors to be blind? And the answer is several reasons. The main reason is that doctors don't understand science. They understand medicine, but they don't understand science. And so they think that they're doing something ethical when they do something unethical. Let me tell you what happens when doctors know. So the doctor looks, the doctor says, oh, I think penicillin is going to be a good deal. So now he's got some patients. There's one he doesn't like. He switches that person, give that person the one he likes and say, oh, you got the placebo, sorry. Let me give you the penicillin, I'll give the placebo to somebody I don't like. So the doctors start moving patients from one group to the other based on their beliefs. Now, if you move a 19-year-old person over into the penicillin condition and the 90-year-old over into placebo condition, which, if you know nothing else about them, who lives longer, a 19-year-old or a 90-year-old? I mean, from this point on, right? Because the 90-year-old, you know they're going to live at least to 90. 19-year-old may not make it. They're driving, they've got a lot of things that can happen. But from here on, how many years after this, at this time, the 90-year-old, you think is more, we already talked about it, right? They're probably not going to live as long as that 19-year-old. So if you start switching people around, you're going to confound the variables. And sometimes the doctors will say this, but I have the good for the patient in mind, and I think that this treatment is the best for that patient, and that treatment is the best for this patient. Take this patient and put him in that group, and I'm going to take that patient and put him in that group, because I think that's what's best for him. And a scientist says, how do you know? You don't know what you're talking about. You have faith, you have belief, you have hypotheses. But until somebody does this study, millions of people are going to be living with the consequences. You want to just start giving people powder because somebody found it under the sink one day and said, here, this is good for strep throat. I asked the computer, Siri, is this good for strep throat? I don't understand what you mean.